In this video, we want to further amplify what we've been saying about innovation. We want to develop it further. And in this case, we want to assess innovation and some of the issues associated with it. Now, we appreciate, hopefully, given your work perhaps in other videos, or from your general reading, you appreciate the importance of innovation. Innovation leads to economic growth, leads to change in the product range, it leads to greater welfare effects for the customer in terms of satisfaction the customer gets from products, because innovation is aligning the product with the requirements of the customer. And as the requirements of the customer changes, the products are innovated and changed to meet those requirements. Sometimes products are in advance of the requirements of the customers, and customers are pleasantly surprised to see that. But what we need to do is to have a framework for the analysis of this. Now, we should appreciate by this time that there is a distinct difference between invention and innovation. Invention is the act of entrepreneurship which initially brings the product into existence. This is someone who is alert to profit opportunities. That's the entrepreneur. Someone who sees a gap in the market and can see a way of filling the gap and introducing a product or a service into the market that hitherto did not exist. And in so doing, of course, improves the lives of the customers and gives the customers a better service, but also generates a profit for the organization. Once the product has been developed and placed on the market, it's at that stage the innovators, in a sense, take over. The innovators are similar to the entrepreneur. They are looking at the product and trying to imagine different ways of using the product, different functionality the product could have, changes, modifications, and so on that could be brought to bear on the product, which will further align it with customer requirements. So we've got a background knowledge of what innovation is. Now let's assess the innovation complexity. Complexity in this context means the changes that are brought about by the product and the adjustments, not just on the part of the business in the creation and delivery of this product or service, but also the adjustments that are made by the customer in the context of the service. Because it's clearly the case that when something innovative is delivered on the market and customers acquire it, customers themselves are changed by that experience. We can all think, for example, of the smartphone and the way it's changed our lives. But some innovations are big, some innovations are small. Some are relatively straightforward and some are complex. So we need to look at the dimensions and degree of innovation. As I said, some are quite small. It doesn't mean that they don't contribute to our welfare and improve the product for us, but they may be marginal. It may be small changes. Sometimes it's quite radical. Sometimes it's a big change. And there are separate videos on the course about looking at different types of innovation and looking at ways of measuring it. In particular, there are models associated with this that you'll come across on the course. So we need to bear in mind that the complexity of the innovation is important. The complexity of the innovation leads to or influences the rate at which the innovation is adopted by the customers, by the purchasers. If it's overly complex, they may be put off. If it's a very small adjustment, they may think it's not worthwhile acquiring because the existing product does essentially the same. So there is a balancing act in order for an innovation to be successful. But the drive is on, the push is on for producers to innovate, because in that way, they fight off their competitors. Competition is really about looking at innovation and making innovative changes to products and services and ways of producing items and ways of conducting business. And the more successful the product or that change is, that innovation is, the more successful the business will be. And that's crucially important in a globalized world where competitors are based all around the world and they're all locked into this competitive process. Technology introduces newness, and we've seen rapid changes in technology over, in particular, let's say the last 30, 40 years, if you look at the history, certainly since the end of the Second World War. And in recent years, it seems to be accelerating. We have more powerful microchips, we have more powerful circuit boards, we have more powerful gadgets. Some of them are for entertainment, some are for communications, and some are a combination of all. Again, back to the smartphone. It was originally meant to be a mobile phone, a phone that could be carried around and make phone calls. Then it was innovated. Someone added a camera. Now you could carry it around, make phone calls and take pictures. And then someone added the internet. And with that, we have a whole plethora of facilities added to the phone. And these are all newness. And customers seem to be attracted by newness. They want new items. But this means that there is an increasing complexity about the product. If a mobile phone goes wrong, it's unlikely that we as individuals can fix it. It would have to go to a specialist. And even then, the specialist may identify the problem and simply take out part of that particular electronics board and replace it with a new one. They don't attempt to fix the problem itself. So it is a much different society to, let's say, back in the interwar years or back into the early parts of the 1900s, when, let's say, a machine in the home was to go wrong, let's say a washing machine, then a service engineer could fix the part. Now, because of the complexity, we can't do that. So technology brings lots of advantages, but it also means we are powerless when it goes wrong. We need to perhaps replace the whole item. There's also market newness. Market newness is the changing face of the market. We have better information. We have more knowledge about the market. We have more knowledge about what's happening in different countries. We can watch the news and see what's happening on the other side of the world, and we can see it instantaneously. We can see it in real terms, in real time. So market newness means that information is communicated almost instantaneously. This means that producers who have an innovative idea, that idea will be communicated around the world almost instantaneously. Once it's delivered, everyone in the world who's interested can find out what it is, because we have the internet, we have these various communications channels. But that means also competitors will know what companies are doing and offering. So the competitors can then set about not just imitating that particular innovation, but perhaps improving it, and thereby get a competitive advantage over the producer. But that also will be communicated around the world. So competition is no longer within local markets or within even national boundaries. Competition is global. Companies throughout the world are fighting a battle with each other, but it's the amount of information that's available, the market newness, And it's that newness that generates the sales, but the newness is also communicated around the world almost instantaneously. And this means there's an ever increasing drive to complexity, better products, more functionality, more reliability. But all of that entails complex solutions. So a lot of the innovative processes are becoming extremely complex, and that may be a barrier to the development of some products, simply because they are so complex. There's a time required to implement it. As products become more complex, it takes more time to piece them together, to fix them and relate to them within the production context. It's important that the items are identified as complex so that resources can be dedicated to their introduction. It's not just simply good enough to say we'll have a circuit board to do this particular task. That circuit board must be tested. It must be tested in the context of the overall product to ensure functionality. But this takes time. This may slow down the competitive process and the innovative process. However, companies who are determined to steal a lead in the market, to jump across their competitors and become market dominant, they will have to tool up or employ specialists, sufficient numbers of specialists, to ensure rapid implementation, not sluggish implementation because of the complexity. So there are lots of issues associated with the complexity of a product in this context. Because products are complex, because of the complexity of them, there's also a risk. Generally speaking, we don't know how the products work. They're run by circuit boards. They're run by advanced processes. We don't understand completely those processes. Commercially, people would say we don't need to. We just know that they will do this particular task. And that's what we're selling. We're selling the task. We're selling the ability to perform this and perform it efficiently. But we don't truly understand how the product works. And that is a big change from the past, when engineers and designers came up with an idea. They understood the mechanism. They understood how the product worked from start to finish. Now, the designers think there is a task to be followed here. We need a circuit board to do it. We need a chip. We don't know how the chip works. It just does. It just works. But it entails a loss of control on the part of the business. It means they haven't got protection against competition. Other people, other companies around the world can acquire the same circuitry and build similar products. So someone with an innovative idea to make something, let's say electronic, may join together several circuit boards to get a particular outcome. Well, that's not a big barrier to entry to someone on the other side of the world or down the road or wherever to join the same circuit boards together and get the same output and then be in competition. So there's a greater risk of competition and of failure because of the complexity itself. Even over and above what I've just mentioned about the standardized approach to components, there's also the complexity that sophisticated products tend to have a greater potential to fail. So if we buy a very advanced, let's say, motor car with a lot of electronics and a lot of technical inputs, we may find glitches over a period of time. Having purchased a car, we find that warning lights come on, and when we bring it back for diagnostic testing, we find that the light just came on because a particular component failed, or a particular component was somehow in contradiction to a different component elsewhere in the car. And these were not shown up during the testing of the car and the design and production of the car. It was only under quite strange and almost freak conditions that this incident occurs. Complexity generates risk. But as I said, the main issue here is complexity and the surrendering of knowledge that we've had to do in order to make products by inserting bought-in components, electronic components in particular, means that competitors can do exactly the same and do it quite cheaply and generate the same product. There is no obvious uniqueness about the product. So complexity of innovations is a big issue. It's a problem. But some would say that it's the complexity that is the attractive part of innovation, and it's what leads to more sales. Others would say that the world is becoming extremely complex. To find a news channel on the television requires quite a bit of clicking around using a remote control to find the news channel, perhaps. Whereas previously there was only one channel or a few channels, and one of them was the news. So we live in an increasingly complex environment. Companies are working in an increasingly complex environment. And that is the nature of innovation. So, examples here. Well, imitability means the ease with which we can imitate a particular product. And we can have low imitability and high imitability. In other words, if it's high, it's very easy to copy a product. It's very easy to copy it. We can be imitated very easily. If it's low, then it's difficult to copy it. And the relatedness to existing business and competencies. Well, if we plot that on the horizontal, we could have low and high here. So a new business could be linked to what a company currently does, its current competencies, in which case there is a high correlation between the proposed innovation and what the company currently does, or it could be low. This could be a departure for the business. It does a certain set of tasks at the moment, and this innovation will extend what it's doing. It's taking the business into different territory. So we can imagine a little matrix like this. So if it's high imitability and it's not linked to existing competencies, in other words, anyone can figure out how to do it very easily, and it's very easy to copy it, copy the product or copy the innovation, then it's likely that there will not be a lot of profit associated. Competitors will do it because it's easy to copy it. And it's not unique to one company. They don't have specialist equipment or specialist know-how or no element of monopoly power. In other words, this information is freely available, so there's no profits. It's not worth copying in that sense. If there's low imitability, in other words, it's very difficult to copy it, but it's also not linked very closely to the assets of the business, to the current competencies and production of the business, then there will be low profits, because the business needs to tool up to make this. The need to look at the product, it's difficult to copy, and also the need to tool up to it. They haven't got current production facilities to match what this proposal is. If it's high imitability and highly related to the competencies of the business, it means it's easy to copy it, but having said that, it's easy to produce, because they've got the skills, they've got the competencies, they've got the capital to do it. So they can copy it and they can do it, so they will make some short-term profits. If they've got the facilities to do it, they've got the competencies and the ability to do it, to make this particular item, but it's very difficult to copy it, then there's long-term profits if they can do it, because others will find it difficult to copy. This model we'll deal with more formally in a separate video and in much more detail. This is just a quick introduction to the type of linkages that we've got when we think about innovation. In this case, the linkage between how easy it is to copy a product and the facilities within the business to make the product. So that little matrix just illustrates that and shows this connection. So in terms of complexity and assessing innovation, that's all we need to do in this particular session. It's quite a short video. A lot of these topics will crop up in other videos. So if you didn't quite grasp it this time round, don't worry, it'll come up again. It'll come up in much more extensive form, and you can go across it at that stage and come back maybe to this video again and look ahead at a later stage as well. So that's about it. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.